Jayson Jorgensen from the Rural Radio Network. Coming up on Saturday, the Huskers are on the road at Purdue. One of the guys who will call the game for Fox Sports is veteran Tim Brando. This week I had a chance to talk to Brando, and I asked him what's kind of his thoughts as he gets ready to broadcast this one on Saturday.
Well, obviously neither team has had the kind of year that they would have hoped. Injuries has played a role in that, as it typically does with teams that have not met the expectations that they desired. Purdue is obviously, I think, even in worse shape than Nebraska, where they are, both at the quarterback position, at wide receiver coming in. A lot of ifs and buts about who may or may not be available for this game. As you and I are taping this conversation, I have as we get ready for our meetings, what's the status of Rondale Moore is going to be a big factor for Purdue, and also be a big factor for the Nebraska defense if that kid can play. And the same would be true for Purdue in terms of whether Adrian Martinez is a go or not a go, and just exactly how many wide receivers are truly available for Nebraska that would be healthy or not as healthy as they need to be. So, but I think it's a pivotal game, certainly for Nebraska, to have the kind of year and to keep the program going where it needs to go. I think Purdue is in one of those situations where they're just down in manpower, and Jeff Brom can certainly absorb a year like this and get back on the right track in another year or two. I think the expectations at a place like Nebraska are much greater, and therefore the pressure is more intense for them to have a good year and get to a bowl game. And if you're going to get to the bowl game, you certainly can't afford a loss to a 2-6 Purdue team with Wisconsin, a trip to Maryland, and Iowa left on your schedule. So I think this is just as was the case at the end of the game with Northwestern at home. That was the last win that they had. It's been almost a month, but you got a feeling in that closing period there before they got the field goal that, the season was in the balance. That if they don't get that field goal, that, you may not feel good about overtime and the way things are going with the injuries that had happened that day. I think the same would be true here with Purdue. If you cannot beat Purdue, then the chances of having the kind of second year that you anticipated with some modicum of improvement might not be there. And I know that means a great deal to the Husker faithful and certainly to Scott Frost and his staff.
Nationally, how do you feel Nebraska's perceived? Are folks as surprised that this has been the struggle for him that it has been around here?
Yeah, I think so. The level of player brought in last year from a recruiting standpoint was pretty good. Really good. And so some of the seeds for success were sown with the kind of recruiting class that he had. Now, listen, the numbers aren't there. That was clearly evident. And I was one of the great proponents in the offseason of Nebraska having a breakthrough year, so I'm as responsible in some measure as a lot of the other pundits for the lofty expectations that haven't been met. And frankly, I was wrong. They needed another year or two of those kinds of recruiting classes. But I do think that to have that kind of recruiting class, you need to have some success from this point forward in this season. And at this stage, improvement would be 6 wins in a bowl game, to get to the point where you can have a winning season and a bowl game opportunity, because this is a lot of young players on this team that need those extra practice days. You cannot put a price tag on what it means for a program like Nebraska to go to a bowl, to prepare for that bowl game. Just gives them a jump start on the spring and recruiting. So that's definitely important. I think that they would have to be. They're not as big a disappointment as maybe some of the Nebraska fans think they may be, but it has been a disappointing year, and I think in large measure injuries and issues with players. A classic example would be the Maurice Washington story. This is a kid that has incredible upside. Frankly, I thought he was going to have a tremendous year. He has the ability to be a big-time talent, not just at the collegiate level, but the next level. but he's had some major issues off the field that have just been a problem for him. And at this stage, he's out of the program. And as I think it was Scott, it said in some publication that it's going to take a lot for him to get back to the Nebraska program. Well, that's unfortunate. It really is, because he was one of the playmakers, and playmakers like him and like J.D. Spielman needed to play at the very highest level, and that just hasn't happened. Wandale Robinson is about the only quote-unquote playmaker that's lived up to the billing this year. And the Martinez situation to me is I'm perplexed by to some extent. He looked like he was going to play in the warm-up, didn't play, and so where are we now with him? Where's his head at? He is the epicenter of all that is important about the foundation of the program. He was the perfect quarterback for the perfect system, and was one of the reasons why I was so high, and a lot of other people that follow college football were so high on a quick rebound for the Nebraska program.
That was Fox Sports play-by-play man Tim Brando, who will have the call on Saturday when Nebraska takes on Purdue. Once again, kickoff on Saturday is set for 11 o'clock Central. For the Rural Radio Network, I'm Jayson Jorgensen.